Hey everybody, Spacewizard here. New cards have been constantly getting revealed since my last card review, so it's time for part 2 of my Whispers of the Old Gods card review. If you'd like to watch part 1, there will be a link to it below in the video description, and I'll also be linking to it directly somewhere on the screen right about now. Nuzith the Corruptor is a legendary 5/7 for 10 with a battlecry that summons all of your Death Rattle minions that died this game. This card is only good if the Death Rattle minions you summon with it are guaranteed to win you the game or prevent your hero from dying, and as there are currently no Death Rattle minions in Standard that do that, this card isn't very good. However, we've only seen about a third of the cards from the new expansion so far, so there's still plenty of room for solid Death Rattle minions that will make Nuzith good, but we'll need to wait and see. Renounce Darkness is a 2-mana Warlock spell that replaces your Hero Power and Warlock cards with another random classes and reduces the cost of those cards by 1. So obviously there's a lot of RNG involved with this card, but I actually think there's a chance you could build a deck around it. There are a lot of really bad cards like Core Rager, for example, that become really good when their cost is reduced by 1. Filling your deck with cards like that could make it difficult for your opponent to out-tempo you, but as I said, there's a lot of RNG involved here, and I don't feel confident saying that this will definitely be a good card, but I do have a feeling that it might be good. Spawn of Nuzith is a 2/2 for 3 with a death rattle that gives your minions +1/+1. This card just seems too weak on curve to be good. It does nothing immediately and requires too many minions on the board when it dies for its death rattle to be worthwhile. I fully expect that this will be one of the least used cards in the set. The Boogeymonster is a legendary 6/7 for 8 with when this attacks and kills a minion, gain +2/+2. This is this expansion's throwaway card. It's not nearly as bad as Poison Blade, but still bad enough that it will never ever see any play. Xaril Poisoned Mind is a rogue legendary 3/2 for 4, with a battlecry and death rattle that add a random toxin card to your hand. And I'll go ahead and throw all those toxins onto the screen now. This is probably one of the better cards that has been revealed so far. Looking at these toxins, they're essentially just class cards like Holy Smite or Blessing of Kings. So one way to think of this card is that its battlecry and death rattle just add a random 1-mana spell to your hand, which I personally think is pretty strong. Obviously this is too slow for a tempo deck to play, but in control and combo decks, I think this could easily become a staple. Tentacles for Arms is a 2/2 for 5 warrior weapon with a death rattle that returns it to your hand. So the idea here is that you put one of these in your deck and you effectively have a 2.5 mana Hunter Hero Power now for the rest of the game that you can optionally use to kill minions. I like the idea, but making one of the cards in your deck a Hero Power, and a weak Hero Power at that, just isn't going to work. You'd much rather run literally any other card, so I don't expect that this is going to see any play unless there's some sort of a weird Death Rattle weapon deck that's really good. Infest is a 3-mana hunter spell that gives your minions a death rattle that adds a random beast to your hand. This card is bad, and here's why. Random beasts generally aren't very good. For this card to even do anything, you need minions on the board. The cards that you get from it aren't added to your hand immediately, and in a deck with beast synergy, you ideally want to draw cards from your deck instead of adding new cards to your hand. Even if Control Hunter becomes a thing, I don't expect it to play this card. Ragnaros Lightlord is a paladin legendary 8/8 for 8 with at the end of your turn, restore 8 health to a damaged friendly character. This card is really strong in matchups where you're worried about high sustained damage. Freeze Mage and Fatigue matchups get countered by this effect, but the card doesn't really do anything when it comes onto the board. So against mid-range or tempo decks, this looks pretty weak, which to me says that the only deck you can really play this in would be a Control Paladin deck, and I'm not sure if that's a deck that's going to work or not, or if it would even want to play a card like this in the first place. So for now, I'm not entirely sure if this will see any play. Cult Apothecary is a 4/4 for 5 with a battlecry that restores 2 health to your hero for each enemy minion. So this is pretty much just the healbot replacement we're getting in this set. Its design makes it really strong against aggro decks, but very weak against burn decks, since those are going to kill you with spells instead of minions. The upside is that its stat line is much better than a healbot's. This is the kind of card that we'll see play depending on how the meta develops. If decks that swarm the board are prevalent, then this card will also be prevalent. Mukla, Tyrant of the Vale, is a legendary 5/5 beast for 6, with a battlecry that adds 2 bananas to your hand. 5/5 is about what you see from 6-drops in Constructed, but the effect here leaves a lot to be desired. It's just not very impactful on its own. In spell-based combo decks, however, the bananas can be used to proc the effects of cards like Gadgetzan Auctioneer or Flamewaker, which could potentially let Mukla see play. It should also be noted that because Mukla is a beast, if a Beast Druid deck ever becomes viable, we might see it played there as well. Shadow Word Horror is a 4-mana priest spell that destroys all minions with 2 or less attack. There's not much to say about this card, really. If aggro decks play a lot of 2-attack minions, then this will be a really strong card. Otherwise, there are better options for clearing the board. Mark of Asharge is a 2-mana druid spell that gives a minion +2/+2. If it's a beast, it also draws a card, so this is obviously a really strong card if you have lots of beasts for it to target, and it's just one of what will probably be many cards that Blizzard is going to use to push the Beast Druid archetype. And if we see another 2 or 3 cards like this, I don't see how Beast Druid won't be the strongest Druid archetype in Standard, since Druid combo will very likely be getting nerfed in the next patch. Scaled Nightmare is a 2/8 dragon for 6, with at the start of your turn double this minion's attack. I just don't see how this could possibly be playable. It does nothing when it comes onto the board, and it's very easy to trade with the turn it gets played. While it's true that you could buff its attack with spells and even stealth it to prevent it from getting killed, that takes a lot of mana, and a lot of cards in your hand. It's very comparable to the already existing Inner Fire Divine Spirit combo, which sees absolutely no play, and might actually be stronger. There's just too many conditions that need to be met for this card to be good. Steward of Darkshire is a paladin 3/3 for 3, with whenever you summon a 1-health minion, give a Divine Shield. The important distinction to be made here is that any minion you summon will be given Divine Shield. This includes tokens from your hero power, or cards like Stand Against Darkness. You can sort of get away with playing this card on curve, but you're not going to be happy about it. And I'm not entirely sure that it's worth a deck slot, since its effect isn't especially impactful. Not a great card, but it's not so bad that I don't think it won't see any play. It's just going to take a very specialized deck to make it work. Skeram Cultist is a 7/6 for 6 with a battlecry that gives your Cthulhu +2/+2. For 6 mana, you can be doing a lot more. There are plenty of other minions that you can run in a Cthulhu deck that are a lot better than this, and playing it in addition to the rest of them would just be excessive, so I don't expect to see this played at all. Cabalist Tome is a 5-mana mage spell that adds 3 random mage spells to your hand. So typically, when you're looking to gain card advantage, Arcane Intellect is going to be your go-to, since its mana to card ratio is just straight up more efficient. But the point of Cabalist Tome is that it's not drawing you cards, it's adding cards to your hand. You're essentially adding 3 cards to your total deck size with this card, which is extremely relevant in matchups where you go into fatigue. So if Control Mage decks ever become popular, you can expect that they will be playing this card over Arcane Intellect. Ishiarge Rage Unbound is a legendary 10/10 for 10 that puts a minion from your deck into the battlefield at the end of your turn. This card is frankly just not good. Its stats are excessive, and if a card like Varian Wrynn doesn't see any play in the absolute best control deck in the metagame, there's no reason to think that a strictly worse legendary would get played either. It's also been confirmed that minions like Ragnaros that get summoned with Ishiarge won't activate their effects until your next turn, which just makes the card a whole lot worse. Ancient Harbinger is a 4/6 for 6 with at the start of your turn put a 10-cost minion from your deck into your hand. I worry that this card might be too slow to see any play. It's excellent if you can protect it, but cards like Emperor Thorson rarely get left on the board when they get played, and they have much stronger effects, so I don't expect that this card will get left alive either. And if it dies without its effect activating, you just played a 4/6 for 6, which will probably end up losing you the game. If there's a way to consistently get this effect off, this will be a great card, but otherwise I think you'd rather just run some kind of draw engine for your old gods. Vilefin Inquisitor is a paladin 1/3 Murloc for 1 with a battlecry that makes your hero power become Summon a 1/1 Murloc. Now right off the bat, I don't think any Murloc aggro deck is going to work because it's never worked before, but at the end of the day, this is a 1/3 for 1. That's about as good as a 1-drop gets. You would probably play this in a regular old Paladin aggro or mid-range deck since Quartermaster is getting cycled out of Standard and therefore won't have any bearing on your hero power. I fully expect that this card will get played just on account of its stat line, but at the same time, I don't expect that its effect is going to be especially relevant. Thing from Below is a Shaman 5/5 for 6 with Taunt and costs 1 less for each totem you've summoned this game. So there's this card called Totem Golem that exists. There's also this card called Tuskar Totemic that exists. If you play either of them, this card is just as good as Druid of the Claw. If you play both of them, this is a 5/5 with Taunt for 4. You can also summon a bajillion totems and hold this in your hand, then play it for 0 in the late game. There's not a whole lot of interesting stuff you can do other than that with this card, it's just a solid addition to a mid-range deck. Master of Evolution is a Shaman 4/5 for 4, with a battlecry that transforms a friendly minion into a random one that costs 1 more. This is a strictly better Chillwind Yeti, and if I'm not mistaken, the absolute strongest 4-drop in the game. It might even be straight up better than Piloted Shredder. The worst case scenario with this card is you just transform a minion that's about to die anyways, and you get something slightly weaker. You can also turn your hero power totems into minions that can actually trade with stuff. This card in combination with Thing from Below pretty much guarantees Midrange Shaman will be one of, if not the strongest deck in the game. That's it for this week's video, guys, but don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'll be back next week with another new video, but until then, you can check out Hearthhead.com or either of its social media pages for all sorts of Hearthstone-related content. See you next time, everybody.